Okay, we are going to start. I'm Kavehi and I'm going to bring on Slam.
All right. So first off, awesome. We got Trump out of office. That's what we wanted. And tonight we're going to talk a little bit about Biden and the future for this country. So we got my friend Jack here. We went to St. Joe's together in undergrad. He studied philosophy. Introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Jack. I met Slam sophomore year. We came close together. I was a psychology and a philosophy major at St. Joe's University. I graduated back in May, and I'm currently a fellow for ACE working at Newman Grady High School in South Philly.
That's what's up. I'm gonna bring on Michaela. Welcome back. This is our first guest who we've had twice.
Yeah, I've been on here before. My name is Michaela. I graduated with a BA in political science and a minor in international studies from UT. I was Kavehi's roommate for a while. I've worked with a couple nonprofits. I'm big into human rights. Yeah.
Word. Okay, I'm going to bring on, last but not least, Tori. It's popping.
Hi, I'm Tori. I'm currently a sophomore at the University of Tampa, studying criminology and 3 with a concentration in American government and law. I met Kavehi working at Career Services last year, and it's just been a ride.
Okay, so for this episode, we wanted to do something post-election because our last one was everything leading up to the election. So last episode, we went over like the feelings and emotions and what we envision for ourselves and for the nation for this upcoming 4 years. And just to reiterate, the whole purpose of this talk series is to create a safe and constructive space for dialogue around current events and injustices to either help talk about things that people are uncomfortable with talking about or just to help educate and inform. So the purpose for this episode is to discuss thoughts and feelings that happened throughout this past week because I think, I'm not gonna speak for everyone, but it was a lot. I'm pretty sure a bunch of us stayed up till like crackhead hours, just watching the statistics, knowing that like it's just gonna go inch by inch. And yeah, I think that's like just talking about the political state of this country and how we can move forward and keep our new president-elect accountable for his campaign. So I'll let Slam start it off for us.
For sure. The first thing we want to discuss is just how you guys feel about how the whole process went down, from maybe your feelings on voting day at the polls. Maybe you had to go in and verify your mail-in ballot signature. That was a big thing, especially down in Georgia, right, in Philadelphia. So yeah, just reflect off of that. Anybody that wants to go first, go ahead.
I can go. So I live in Florida right now. I live in Tampa. I did do a mail-in ballot just because my permanent address is like a town over from where I live right now. So I did send it in about 2 weeks early just to make sure that I had, time for everything to be counted and everything like that. I was able to track it online, which was super cool. I know that Tampa and St. Pete were both doing that, so that was a really awesome feature. But gonna be honest, I consider myself super aware of what's going on in the world and kind of the media and the political sphere right now. But as soon as I sent in the ballot, I was kind of like, that's all I can do. Like, there's really nothing more that I can do as a singular person. So it's not something that I should constantly be thinking about every second of the day because I do have to focus on my own life. So it would be very difficult if I was just constantly being like, who's going to win? Like, what's happening right now? While kind of keeping aware of everything that was going on. But yeah.
I guess I can go next. So like Michaela, I also did a mail-in ballot for Tampa, but only because I'm actually at home in New York right now. But I checked mine online and I was tracking it because I was just so scared with, like voter fraud that, they weren't going to count it or it was going to get thrown out and blah, blah, blah. But I think just this past week, it really has been like a roller coaster of emotions. Like Tuesday, I wore my voted sticker like all day long. I was so proud of myself. And just like, I guess it was just fear almost started creeping in because it was like, okay, well, what's going to happen now? Like Michaela saying, like, there's nothing really else we could do at that moment. And Mellon is super Republican. So there were Trump rallies going on like the whole weekend leading up. And it was just like a lot of emotional buildup going on. And then, Tuesday night, it just was that feeling of like, okay, if I stay at one more hour, maybe then they'll post the votes. Okay, if I wait another hour, they'll post it and, end up taking days. And yesterday, I guess when Biden was announced, it was like just an immediate feeling of relief. I feel like washed over, that there was still some type of hope in America, that we aren't all racist, believing that, white people are better or anything like that. And then it sort of crept in like, okay, well, what's going to happen now? How are we going to try and fight this and what happens? And then like, how are we going to hold them accountable? Stuff like that. So I think just, it really has been a roller coaster and trying to come to terms with that. I can be feeling a million things at once and it's okay to be feeling those things because I know everybody else is too. But yeah.
Yeah. I voted in person. I don't live too far away from my hometown, so I went back in with my dad and then I got dropped off in the morning and went to work. Polls are fine. I felt the polls were more packed, at least in my area, in 2016 than they were in 2020. However, I'm also in a state now where job's not done because they're going to go to courts. What will they find? Who knows? And for me now, I'm kind of sitting in this situation where I'm going, all right, you know what? The courts are packed, both the Supreme Court and I believe Trump holds the record for the most judges filled in positions as well. So there's going to be a lot of court cases. There's going to be a lot of litigation. And for me, it's just waiting for that answer to come out. Like everyone else has said, I'm going to echo the same statement. It's like I casted my ballot and I am so far removed from that sphere on the side of the law that all I can do now is wait for what the courts come back with. I can hope that the courts are going to come back with, an outcome for Biden, but at the same time, we just got to wait now to see how it's going to go. So I'm kind of, I don't know if I should say nervous so much, but I'm definitely in a state of just, I'm not sure. It's a good point. It's like a kind of a mixed bag of emotions, how I'm feeling.
Just like in a limbo.
Yeah, I'll go off on it a little bit. I was fortunate to have the opportunity to work in an election poll in Odessa, Delaware with my mom and my brother. And probably record timing, we had a 15-minute line wait. It's pretty awesome. Voter suppression is crazy. I heard a lot of people were waiting for like 2-3 hours in all types of different weather. I have another friend who lives in Nevada now, and she was working tirelessly, counting votes and making sure that, the polls were ready to go. And had to be escorted out to her car because of the Trump supporters outside of her building were being crazy. So shout out to all the election workers. It was a lot of work, very tiresome. And I'm just happy I had the opportunity to be a part of that. Kavehi, how about you? How do you feel?
What is it called? I went in to go vote. I registered to vote via mail and my ballot did not come in, but my mom's came in. She's like, we're going to the polls, forget it. And I was like, okay. So we went at like the first thing, like we got there early so we didn't have to deal with a huge like commotion or whatever. But it was super fast, like super effective. We were in and we're out. I was just bummed because I didn't get a sticker, but I mean, like it was the act that counted. But even after that, like same with everyone else, I kind of was like, okay, like I did my part, but I still tried to do like a little bit by like posting stuff online. I like talked to my boyfriend and his friends, was like, did y'all vote? And they're like, no, not yet. And I would follow up and be like, did you vote yet? Did you vote yet? To the point where he started to get on his friends to go vote. So I was like, that's what's up. And then I would like talk to my other friends. I was like, did you vote? And like one of my friends was like, no, like I didn't vote. And this was like after the fact. And I like actually got upset with her. Like I didn't care like who she voted for. I mean, like small kind, but her reasoning was that one, she was too tired and didn't have the time, and two, everyone's dumb. And I was like, those are terrible excuses. I use different words, but I was like, those are terrible excuses because, especially with this election, we all had, not all, I don't want to say all, but there was a huge opportunity to do mail in ballots. There were so many different ways to vote than just go in. Like everyone tried to make that extra step, but yeah. But yeah, it was just a roller coaster of feelings. But yeah. You're muted, dude.
So let's talk a little bit about flip states. We were super surprised about PA. I made sure to register in PA and not Delaware. And, we saved it. What are you guys' thoughts on the states that you saw switch last minute?
I was like, damn.
Georgia, I was so surprised. I had no expectations for them. I thought they were going to go completely red. Pennsylvania, I thought that I kind of had a hindering that they were going to go blue. So I was initially surprised that they were red because I don't know. I'm from the Northeast, so it's kind of weird seeing Northeastern states go red. But then like Michigan, I think it was Michigan and Wisconsin, whatever. Those two states, I was pleasantly surprised. I wasn't like shocked that they went blue. Honestly, I I remember like initially seeing like the results from the first couple of days where it was just kind of the people that went in person, and like Trump had over half of the popular votes. I was so surprised by that. And I think that initially came from social media. And so, okay, I don't want to dive too deep into this, but with social media, it's definitely an echo chamber. So, like the people that you follow, you're going to constantly hear the messages that you're kind of looking for. So I was very surprised that he continued to win over half of the popular vote. But then I realized that that didn't count the mail-in votes. But yeah, Georgia, I was the most surprised by, and then following that, Pennsylvania.
Georgia.
I feel
guess
like oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Tori, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, just down for Georgia, I feel like they've been building up to this moment for so long that when they finally turned blue, it was like they did it. Like Stacey Abrams went out and she got all of those unregistered people, and it really showed how much voter suppression there was going on there that people didn't know about, because look at the numbers they turned out. I think Wisconsin really surprised me, especially with everything that they had going on there early this summer, I believe with Kenosha. And like, just everything going on there, that they turned blue. I thought they would stay, red Republican, but they didn't. So I thought that was pretty interesting to see.
Arizona, the ghost of John McCain came back, to bite Trump in his ass. This is also where my thoughts on the courts come back again. Since everything was going on at different places, again, voter fraud, as we put up in air quotes, we have to wait till the courts get back. I would not be too surprised if one flipped backwards the other way, only because, again, we have these courts that have been stacked in a certain way before, so the justice system is on their side, which at the same time is when these states do not flip and nothing is found, I do not want to hear an excuse of, it was the courts were out to get us. This is your justice system. You appointed the judges, you put these people in position. So at the end of the day, the ball is in your court. I think it was a fair election. Sure, absolutely. Every single election we've had, there is always some level of fraud. Because it is a human system, there's going to be error in it somehow. So for us now, what we have to do is we have to take a moment, step back, and be like, all right, let's watch what's going on. I excited about some of these states? Absolutely. I'm ecstatic about some of them. But at the same time, too, we just got to wait for the courts to get back. We don't have all the information, and it's very difficult for me to comfortably come out and talk about it, only because I do understand there's probably some backdoor information somewhere that I do not have, or that I haven't read from somewhere yet.
I definitely agree with you, Jack, in that there's still like a lot that's gonna happen because it's going to come up in different courts, and that will be the final verdict. And he has stacked the courts in his favor. And I think I was listening to NPR, and they were talking about how once, like, because they're still counting ballots, so once the ballots get to a certain number, it'll be past the statute of limitations on whether or not they can be like, oh, voter fraud. But I think the biggest thing is human error. Like, it's very hard, from what I've read upon, it's very hard to actually commit voter fraud. For the most part, it's human error of either like the clerk not typing something in properly, someone not filling something out correctly. But yeah, I think it just hit me, but like it's a very strong point to bring up to your counterparts, is that when it does come to the courts, don't cry over spilled milk, because the courts are stacked in your favor.
And this can also go into, to build off that point you just had, it can build up into, we've had this argument for a while going on that Trump is a fascist. And what we can do now is we can look at absolutely the populist rhetoric that he has, taken as his campaign base. We can make a very strong argument that it's fascist in nature. But if we want to send home the argument that he is truly a fascist, these courts will show that. Like, if he's going to use the justice system or use the office in a certain way to get a result that he would like, then I think we can now turn around and say, oh, he absolutely, there's no doubt about it, was a fascist. But at the same time, too, is the one thing about this election that I've grown an immense amount of just awe for is the separation of powers that, we figured out somehow so many years ago, that have worked in such a way that somehow everything was held together in 4 years. We had different battles going on in different states, a constant movement between the people and a constant movement between the House and the Senate. But at the end of the day, we're still here to talk about it, and we're still here to move on. And me and Slam were talking about this today at brunch, is if Biden's first year or first, couple of months are just going to be working on the plumbing in the House, trying to fix some things up here and there, I'm completely fine with that. If you need to go through and work on all the pipes, and this is also now, because Trump still has the presidency for 2 months, we have to now watch very carefully what is going to happen in those next 2 months. Is it going to be, a sudden turn of favor and he's going to be a loss with grace? Or is it going to be, I'm going to put up as many roadblocks as I possibly can before I leave this office? And those are some of the things that are at play right now for me that I'm trying to watch.
Sure.
See, like, when you were talking about bringing it to the court and like calling him fascist, like, okay. So like with calling him a fascist, like, you can call him a fascist all you want, but considering he has such a cult following, and like considering he won like half of the popular votes at this point, like, it's not necessarily going to sway the public. And then even then, the Supreme Court at this point is majority Republican. And considering Amy Coney Barrett, I am her biggest hater. She doesn't know anything about law at all. She didn't even know the First Amendment.
I'm pretty sure I'm more qualified to sit on the Supreme Court than she is.
So like, considering, like, once they take it to court, and this was like one of the biggest things for me personally when she got elected to the Supreme Court, that I was terrified of, like terrified to my core, is that he would eventually call fraud on the election. And I guarantee that's going to happen at this point. And like, I know people call me a pessimist. I don't necessarily agree with it. I consider myself a realist. But I do believe he's going to call fraud in the election, and he's going to use Amy Coney Barrett as his like saving grace. And considering she knows absolutely nothing regarding law, she's going to be like, hey, conservative, Republican, whatever, and then try and back him to try and just like save their asses. Excuse my French. but I don't know. Like, you can call him a fascist to the public as much as you want. Like, I guarantee CNN will do it as many times as possible. But the American public is not necessarily going to know what that means or follow it completely, if you get my gist. But I agree with you.
Yeah, no, and just to clarify, I wasn't calling him a fascist. I was commenting on like the idea of the R. I was making sure. Yeah, no, definitely with the Supreme Court nominations, Brett Kavanaugh, joke, the absolute partisanship that he showed during his speech was terrifying to me. That he was so aligned to one side so hard. I did personally love Neil Gorsuch. I loved his talks that he came in. He has one of my favorite little speeches when it was towards the end. It's a great video. If you go on YouTube, you can find it. It's Neil Gorsuch's obituary. And he talks about one of the activities that he had his students do when he was in law. Amy Coney Barrett, I think she's grossly underqualified in the sense that she hasn't had a long time in an active judge role. In her academic career of law, absolutely. I mean, her accolades speak for herself in that regard. But for me, is like what I want is I want somebody who is going to that Supreme Court position to have those years as a judge. I want you to be deciding on cases frequently. I want you to take those controversial cases, make those tough calls, and make those beautiful arguments that I know you can, so that when you get to that big stage and you're finally up there, you can look back and say, well, yeah, I made that tough call, and this is how I made it. And here was my argument. And I want to see that lucidity that you can bring to the table. And for me, I didn't find that in Amy Coney Barrett. So it's just, for me, it was not, she was not a good one.
I'm going to add also the separation of church and state. That's big for me. But she's obviously, and she's declared this publicly, that there is absolutely no separation for her. So that's really dangerous. I'm speaking as a woman and in terms of reproductive rights, kind of, but yeah, the separation of church and state is extremely important in considering she is literally going to serve the rest of her life on the Supreme Court. That is extremely dangerous. So I am not her fan, but yeah.
For sure. I guess this is a good point to segue into what we want to see from Biden going forward. We talked a little bit about Trump and his process of taking things to the Supreme Court. That's already happening. He's tweeting about it. A lot of his lawsuits are getting denied. But what do you guys want to see from Biden going forward, and how are we going to keep him accountable?
I want to see him be more aggressive in the laws governing how we protect the environment, because Trump has had all of these. He's gotten rid of all these laws and policies, especially like protecting national parks and stuff. Like, why? Like anyway. Earlier we had talked about how Biden said multiple times no, that he's not going to do anything about fracking, when fracking is like one of the absolute worst things you can do to the environment for various reasons. But yeah, I definitely want to see it. I want to see him be aggressive with how he's going to protect the environment. Because if we have no environment, we won't have food. We won't have there's so many other things that come with protecting the environment.
I mean, yeah, the environment is the foundational piece to everything he says he stands for, right? Social equality.
Science is a huge thing.
Economic equality. You can't have any of it without the environment. Before we go into that any further, do you guys feel as though there are things that Joe Biden needs to rectify in his past as he rectifies Trump's administration? Choices of Trump's administration is what I meant to say.
Police.
So I mentioned this before we started. He, in his past, was a big proponent on the war on drugs. So if anyone is not familiar with that, it's essentially criminalizing any drug use instead of rehabilitating people. As a country, I do think we're making a beautiful step forward to it. I know Oregon just decriminalized all drugs. They just legalized psilocybin mushrooms. I believe DC did too. I'm not completely sure on that. I know some other states legalized weed as well. So that's an awesome step forward. But he was a huge proponent in that. And I think in this country, especially, opioids, like weed, anything, we definitely need to make a step towards rehabilitating people rather than criminalizing it.
Punishing us.
But yeah, that was a big thing for me. And then I know for Kamala Harris, she has been big into the criminal justice system. Notably, she put trans women into men jails or trans men into women jails. I'm not entirely sure about that, but that was another big thing regarding her. So yeah, criminal justice system is like a really, really, really big thing with them that definitely needs to be addressed.
Go ahead, Tori.
Okay. I was gonna say I think I'm definitely looking for them to sort of rectify how they both treated the Black community in the past. I know like Joe Biden has voted against it multiple times. He said that if we voted for Donald Trump, you know, quote, we ain't Black. I mean, that testament, do I agree with it? Maybe a little bit. But I think they definitely both need to address it. I know in his speech last night, he thanked Black voters, saying that we turned out for him. We basically handed him the win and that he wanted to address systemic racism. But then he also goes against that by sort of saying, you know, he doesn't support the defund the police movement. So I just really want to see like what their plan is to, you know, confront the systemic racism that's been here all along, and how that directly affects the Black community in the prisons, in the community, criminal justice system, because, you know, I feel like they're not really showing a clear plan on how that, I don't know if there is a clear plan on how to do that. You know, there's so many different elements to it, and how not only it affects the Black community, all people of color, all minorities. So I think that's what I'm really looking for them to do. Why I sort of think he picked Kamala. I mean, he needed the diversity of a woman, of a person of color. And I mean, I know she was district attorney or cop, however you want to call it, but I think her experience in the criminal justice system, in working directly with the jails and the prisons and, you know, law enforcement, that might be to his advantage. You know, it might be a little crazy to say, but because she has experience with how these systems directly work, maybe she might have some insight on how to change them to work more in our favor, so that there isn't, you know, this huge mass incarceration of the Black community inside the prisons.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, I'm a very big fan of the idea of like a redemption arc, and for me, it's someone that you actualize what has happened in the past and you move forward and you try to rectify it in the right way. I'm a very big fan of that. For me, some of the big things that I definitely think Joe Biden needs to do for him to amend from his past to build off the Slams question is number one would be the crime bill. The other one would be the war on drugs.
Can you guys mute yourself? I got some feedback.
The war on drugs, the crime bill, and then even under the Obama administration, the drone strike program that happened in Syria. Those are three major things for me. The crime bill, I'd love to be able to see him come in and start doing those sweeping criminal justice reforms that we need. I think Oregon, as Michaela touched on it earlier, I think it has the potential to be a phenomenal step one. It has the absolute potential to be it. What I think we're going to see now is we're going to have people maybe coming from California or other parts of the United States now moving there. And we might see, you know, a little bit of a surge of a drug problem there. But now this is where it becomes a good step too. And are we now going to come in and are we going to start now that it's decriminalized, the private prisons are going to become weak. So now we have to do something. If they're going to become weaker, how can we start working in maybe tax revenue? How can we start working with rehab centers? Why don't we pick up the phone, call Europe, call those countries that have already done something and say, hey, what did you do that worked? And let's see what we can do. Maybe get a little bit of a correspondence going on there. Bring them out to work. Have Oregon be your home base. Make that your case study. Study it, see what works, what doesn't work, and then from there slowly start to spread it out to the other states. And then all of a sudden, maybe one day we can have, you know, a model for rehab and a model for drug use. One of the things that I am very happy for, and I pat Biden on the back for this is I think he made a phenomenal line during the debate when Donald Trump called out his son. And a lot of people online were making fun of his son for being addicted to drugs. And what did Biden do? I am proud of my son. I am proud that he confronted my addiction. And I am proud that he is working through it just like millions of other Americans. If we want to change what it means to be addicted in America, and we want to get rid of that negative stigma, it starts at that level. And he was on the biggest stage and he did it. And that to me is huge. The crime bill, I don't think we need to speak on that at all. It was a bipartisan bill that was just awful all around the charts. It gave private prisons tremendously too much power. It gave jurisdiction in areas that it shouldn't have been. It led, we can go on a whole rant about that. And the last one, the one that Slam and I were talking about earlier, is the drone strikes in Syria. Under the Obama administration, a drone program was started and it was tested in Syria. It was tested on villages in Syria. It was tested on different areas.
Hospitals, weddings, school buses.
And that to me is a major stain, and one of the things that I will always look back on the Obama administration for failing, drastically failing. And I would love to see Joe Biden do something, roll back the drone program, come in and work in Syria if he can at the time. There's a lot of moving parts, and I think it needs to be a
While they're frozen, I'll make a comment on the Middle East. I think the Middle East is a very, 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 very difficult and touchy subject just because there are so many moving parts to it. I completely agree. The Obama administration, and this is something that is kind of ignored in terms of American politics in like the general public. Everyone kind of idolizes the Obama administration and kind of ignores what they did in the Middle East because they don't really know about it. But everything that happened in the Middle East was extremely effed up and was not okay at all. So I completely agree with what you're saying. And like, they really do need to rectify that. But with how involved we are in that area, and this is not a personal opinion. This is like, America is a very capitalist nation, and we have a lot of money involved in the Middle East, and I don't see us removing our presence in the Middle East anytime soon, but I completely agree. I deeply wish that Joe Biden would kind of rectify what happened with the Obama administration in the Middle East, in Syria, in Lebanon, and everything like that. And yeah, I completely agree though.
Yeah, I think we need to dig into that a little bit more because I think some of the things you said were pretty broad. And for people that don't understand what happened in the Middle East, Obama's administration, I have some facts right here, sold arms to Saudi Arabia, also supported their illegal blockade of Yemen, which resulted in killing more than 100,000 people. Insofar as we're talking about how capitalistic America is and how we're foundationally based in imperialism, I do not agree that we should. I don't know whether you're saying that we don't have to leave the Middle East. The only threat to me that I see in the Middle East is us constantly trying to be involved because of oil. I feel like we need to go ahead and focus on ourselves and come up with clean energy here instead of trying to get the oil out of the Middle East. And Joe Biden does need to rectify his past. And the best way to do that is limiting our, how would you say? I don't even know. What's it? Our presence, not our presence, but maybe
rolling. I think like a really good point would be, I don't see us ever becoming uninvolved in the Middle East. Early on, before we did, Britain had a great quote when we first took. They kind of gave it to us. They were happy to give it to us. And they said, if you break it, you fix it. Have fun. Take it. I would love to see the slowdown of the military-industrial complex.
There it is.
But there's another problem here now. It's something called the war on terror. And the issue with that is it's war on terror. And who gets to decide what terror is? Well, that's what the United States is. And what is the United States? The United States is run by oligarchical corporations and the military-industrial complex. What I would love to be able to see is rolling back the military-industrial complex in the Middle East and providing a more sustainable and I don't even know if it can happen, but a ethical business practice with them, making sure that if we will come in and we'll help you build your oil fields, but why are you doing this in your country? What's going on there? If we want everybody to play by the rules, then we have to play by the rules as well. Join those, one of the things that the United States we're not involved in is we're not technically involved in any national law agreement, international law agreements. We operate on our own terms. But if we want everyone else to follow the rules, but we're not in the agreement with everybody else, they're following their rules, but we don't have to because we're not a part of that. It's whoa. Let's all start playing by the same rules here. That way we can kind of move forward and everyone can hold each other accountable, either hopefully through economic sanctions and non-war means. Is that what you're kind of going for a little bit?
Yeah, but I also don't feel as though we need to be in the Middle East helping them with their economic infrastructure. I feel like we have enough to deal with here.
That's fine. Yeah, if you want to pull out completely, absolutely. I mean, I'm not dead set on any specific, solution or resolution. To me, it's just, for me, I would love to get out, period. And how we get out, if that means slowly rolling back, it means slowly rolling back. If it means we can somehow pull everything out, we can pull everything out. But at the same time, too, is we need to make sure that we're not damaging it even more when we're doing it. I don't want to leave it any worse than it already is. If that's an impossibility and I live in, a fantasy world, then so be it. But that's kind of what I want to try to do.
Yeah, I feel that.
Tori, what do you have to say? I feel like
I was going to sort of bounce off what Slam is saying about how, we don't have to be there right now. We have a lot going on. And I think, the world is watching. They've been watching this whole week with everything going on. And I think if now was the time to pull out, if we really just sort of take a couple years and focus on our mental health, this would be the time, because I feel like our relationships with other nations right now are so damaged by what Trump has been doing the past 4 years. Like nobody wants to work with us anymore. They see us as a big joke. So if we really want to sort of revamp that, take time, build ourselves back and sort of become, a powerful nation again, or, set an example that we want other nations to follow, would be the time to do that. So maybe starting by trying to create some green energy here. And while you're doing that, you're creating millions of jobs for Americans that are now unemployed by this pandemic. You're not going out trying to, destroy these villages and these homes digging for oil. So I think it could be a good idea to sort of step back, but who really knows like what would happen if we did? I mean, when's the last time we haven't been in the Middle East? I don't really know what would go on.
So I just wanted to add on to that. I've studied the Middle East for a little while. I wouldn't consider myself an expert, but what I was saying before, I would love for us to pull out of the Middle East, but right now it'd be a little bit complicated for just how long we've been in there, for how involved we are, like you said, like all their oil fields and everything like that, which is a very unfortunate situation. But in terms of kind of working on ourselves, I know that Biden already said that he was going to rejoin the Paris Agreement, which is regarding climate change and everything like that. And that's a very, very big international agreement, which will have us kind of reclaim our position as a world power in terms of climate change and green energy and everything like that, which is really awesome because Trump pulled out of that kind of recently. I believe it was in like the last year or so. But that was a super big deal. And then he was also talking about rejoining the WHO, which is a World Health Organization, which is another big thing because they were a big proponent in coronavirus. And we kind of stopped listening to them in the past couple of months. So Biden already has plans about trying to rebuild America. I would love to see more of his, but those are his two big ones right now. So I did want to add that in. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think rejoining the Paris climate agreement is obviously a good first step, but I don't think it's enough. I think the United States needs to come together and come up with new strategies to really limit the carbon that we're putting off as an industrial nation. And insofar as building relationships with other international countries, I think that is something, super important for us to be on the same page about how we're going to go forward to decarbonize the entire planet. And I don't know, I think the that agreement's cool, but I think we have to do more. So what can Biden do to really lead the charge against climate crisis?
I got a great one. Reverse what the Bush and Cheney administration did with fracking, which was basically giving them free reign away from the Clean Air and Clean Water Act. But at the same time, too, is one of the things Slam and I were talking about, and I don't know if this is a possibility because I don't know the logistics of it enough, and I'm not going to act like I know economics enough. But what I would love to see is, I fight for the union worker because I've worked with them for so many years. I have such a great amount of respect for them. My family were union workers growing up. I've worked with them in my past. And I don't want to just come in and rip it all out right away. But what I want to do is I want to see in that Rust Belt where those factories were. I want to see if we can go back in there and maybe rebuild some of those factories. And then now start doing that renewable energy, making solar power plants, making wind turbine plants, giving so that when we take away fracking, we're not isolating and destroying communities and towns and family, like good working people. We're not doing that to them. But what we're doing is now, we're not only now taking a step in the right direction for the environment, we're helping the American people. And if we do it well enough, we can create a model for other nations to get on with us and say, hey, wait a minute, well, that worked really well. Why don't we bring that over to our country? And then they can call us up, create those international relations that we need on an environmental and global level to say, hey, wait a minute, the United States did that. That's a really good job. Well, how about you guys come over here and let's work on this together, and then we can get ideas for them and back and forth. And I think that'd be such a fantastic way to do it. Again, if that is a possibility, I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I'm going to take it a step further. What do you
Wait,
say?
I have a question for all of you. Jack brought up a great point of creating these different like factories to build all of these things to help with renewable like energy and resources. But how would you guys propose going about implementing it in certain areas, such as like Native American reservations or places in Hawaii where these different renewable resources would be like, they're in prime, like they have prime locations, but due to cultural significance and just like the value that that land holds, where the natives or locals do not want to put that there, how would you go about trying to, either convince them or find an alternative in providing renewable resources for Native communities?
Renewable resources or renewable companies on Native land? What do you mean?
Like, okay, so for example, like wind turbines, those are great for, what is it called? Creating energy. It's somewhat simple in regard to building it. You guys know how they look, but a lot of people will bring up the argument of different birds in the area. So like in Hawaii, on Maui, they had different wind turbines set up along one of the ridges. But at first people were arguing about that, how it looks ugly and how it's like not good for the environment when it's literally up there and like there's nothing else near it. I know on Oahu, they wanted to put up wind turbines out on the like North Shore kind of east side, out in Laie Kahuku area, which people were protesting against that because it was near where there was indigenous bats. And so those were like killing the different bats and like native populations of birds and species. So it's like, yes, there are all these like different resources that can be used for creating like renewable energy in these different areas, but how do you go about it when like the natives and locals don't want it there? Like what would be the alternative to introduce that? Like, does that kind of make sense? I know it's like a multiple.
Yeah, I think the first thing we have to recognize is the hand that Native people had in this election. So let's start there. I got a cool picture. Can you see it? So in the orange, can you see?
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
In the orange, those are the counties, right? And then, or no, those are reservations in the counties. And that's how Arizona voted. It was the reservations that voted for Biden. And yet he said nothing about CNN calling them something else when they acknowledged how Native Americans voted. So if America wants to, become green, first they have to acknowledge and recognize the sovereignty of tribal nations, value their voices and their understanding of the land that our people have been living on for thousands of years, and working with them to build towards a radically different and green future. I feel like Native people have been on the front lines for decades now and have been getting beaten, hosed down, in the name of trying to protect Kaesenahaki, Mother Earth. And the government has refused to listen to us. So, building relationships with sovereign nations, respecting that sovereignty and respecting their culture and recognizing its significance. I think there are areas of reservations where you could put renewable energy. How would you even say that?
I was going
You
to
know what
say
I'm
is
saying?
that was a way that we could build like a true relationship and recognize the sovereignty that they have a right to.
But also realizing that you can't just go in somewhere where you
Mhm.
see a whole bunch of space and be like, yeah, we're going to put a wind turbine here.
And that was
Just
where it
like,
was.
yeah.
No,
there it is.
I don't mean to cut you off because that was where I was going. It was you respect that decision. If that sovereign nation says no, we do not want this here. You do not now go to Washington. You do not find some backdoor deal, or you do not come in and commit an atrocity just to say get what you want. You respect the answer. You respect that decision that they have made, and you move on. And discuss like that. I feel it could be a very good way of starting to, like you said, acknowledging those voices and respecting those voices.
Yeah, and I think that question is a little bit extreme because I don't even think America has to implement renewable technologies on native land because there's so much land that they've taken from us that they could use already. You know what I mean? We're talking about parking lots where you could put turbines, you could put what are the other stuff.
The covers for like the cars and put solar panels on that. They
Solar
have that on mine.
panels on
They even
that.
have it on a wall
Doing that.
where you literally protect your cars and you start to collect energy. Like it's simple things like that. Build on what we already have. But I definitely agree. I think the country would benefit a lot from listening to natives just in general. Putting
And we have
natives
the most natives in Congress right now.
Yes.
Okay. You know?
That was going to be a big point of mine is that we literally don't need to go on native land. Like we don't need to. There's so much space. Like I was thinking about how in like the Midwest and like Montana, Idaho, Utah, all those, like there is so much space where it's like one person per 1,000 square miles. There is more than enough space to put a ton of solar panels and be able to power the entire country. Like we don't need to go on the very little land that we have already given the Native Americans. Like we don't need to take any more land away from them. And piggybacking on what Slam was talking about in collaboration with the Native Americans, I think that is a huge thing that we should be implementing and we should have already implemented into our government. This is also a very large problem in South America. They are a big victim of imperialism, just like North America is, where their native population, although it is a very large percentage of their actual population, they're not listened to whatsoever. They are not represented. They're completely ignored. And it has taken a huge toll on their environment and then just their government in general. I do think that it really should be one of the first steps that we make in terms of creating a better plan for climate change, and a Green New Deal is definitely working with Native American communities, just because, and this is coming from an American perspective, we do kind of stigmatize the idea of their connection with Mother Earth. We do already value that. So I do believe that that should be played upon deeper into our actual governmental affairs in terms of climate change. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I
And-
think the country would benefit by having Native Americans and Native Hawaiians in positions of power in regard to governing the land, because it will benefit everyone. Like Salma said, since we have had this relationship with Mother Earth and acknowledging that we don't need to take more than we need in order to have stuff for the next generation. So taking that those morals or ideas and trying to implement that into the government, I think will benefit everyone. To not
And
only
not
think for
only,
ourselves now, but for the future generations.
yeah, and I
I
would
just wanted
say
to.
the government, our corporational cultures, our family cultures, when you talk about restorative justice, I think you can implement so many different parts of Native culture into every aspect of American life that'll help promote the protection of our, what, next 14 generations. You said?
Sorry,
I just
Tori,
wanted
you
to sort
want?
of add in, yeah. So actually, I saw a post a few days ago about the Native American like record turnout in this election, and it was like, they owe us nothing, and they still continue to show up. They still continue to fight for what they believe is right, and they're constantly looked over. They're called something else. Like no one, no one recognizes them. So I think if you were to, not that we need to at all. Like I completely agree with you guys on not bringing these renewable sources onto native land. There's so many other options. But if you were, like, you have some of them, you have to talk to them. They know what's best for their land and for their communities. And if you just keep ignoring that, you're just going to have repeats of history that we keep seeing and just wiped out. I had something else to say.
It'll come back to you.
Yes.
We'll put a pin in it.
Yeah, I'll remember it like 20 minutes from now.
And I guess, I mean, what's another question we could ask is how can we continue to keep our generation politically involved going forward? Because, just because Trump's out of office doesn't change anything about America. We just have a new representative of the same policies and laws that Trump represented. So how do we move forward as the young generation about to take control in the next 20 years?
All right, I remembered. I was gonna say that we have to sort of fix. This goes to the next question too. Like we have to fix the whitewashing of history and how we teach it in our schools. Why are we only taught about Native American cultures and indigenous cultures and how they relate back to the first white settlers that arrived? And as soon as they're no longer relevant, we stop hearing about it. We only hear about the Black community and how they were enslaved, and then it's gone. The next time we hear about them is the Civil Rights Movement. I think in order to keep future generations involved, you have to teach them that their culture doesn't start and end with its relevance to America. Like you have, they were here before us and they'll be here after us, and we have to like recognize that, and it has to be changed. Like I remember my textbooks growing up, like the Egyptians, they looked like your stereotypical white male, and we know that's not true. Like it has to change, and if that changes, if we recognize our importance outside of how we relate back to these things, I think that'll keep them engaged because they know that they matter. You know what I mean? They know that it doesn't just stop and end when things go bad, that it has to stay constant. It has to keep going, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I want to piggyback off of that. I definitely agree with you, Tori, in that we need to keep the flow of conversation and knowledge and keep it going. Especially like I feel like our generation has the advantage of social media, and I know that can be used in either a super good way or super negative way, but it's having that connection with not only people in our immediate circle, but like on an international level, because like this is how we're learning about things that are going on in all different parts of the world is through social media. And I think that our generation can keep using that to our advantage to keep not only this movement but other movements going on. And I think our generation is becoming very clever with the way that we pass on knowledge. And I know, like I mentioned a lot, but like different memes, like the memes and jokes that have come out of this past week are, to me, top tier. I think they're hilarious. But I also think it's a clever way to help someone remember something. Like I showed my sister this video of like these different states that had flipped, and she memorizes it because I showed her this dumb TikTok. But it's like using these different things to our advantage. So using social media to keep promoting these different things, like Tori said, to make people understand that their religion or like their culture does not start and end here, that it started long before they were here and long before like different people were introduced to them, and it's going to continue, it's going to get passed on. And I think that's a huge thing, especially with native cultures and languages, is making sure that you acknowledge the history before the white man came in to play, but also value the culture and language, because Native Hawaiians and Native Americans, their language and culture have literally almost been wiped out to existence. And it was through people who were steadfast, who were like, no, we're going to keep teaching this to our children. And yeah, I'm just going to go on a tangent, but yeah, I'll let someone else piggyback off of that.
I completely agree with what you guys are saying. I think that social media is a really huge tool for our generation. I do definitely think that it can be extremely detrimental, because I mentioned this earlier, it can create these echo chambers, because you're really only following people that you necessarily like agree with until you actively follow people that you want to like hear the other side opinions of. But I do think it's a very good tool to be connected across the globe. I know that when the protests with like the End SARS in Nigeria was going on, I never ever would have known about that unless it was for Twitter. So like I do think we do have that amazing tool where we can connect with people our age across the globe and really learn about everything that's going on, and kind of use that to our advantage. And I mean, as long as we continue to use it to our advantage and it doesn't become this like negative feedback loop, that can be a great tool for us in terms of like political whatever. But yeah.
Absolutely agree. But what right now, what can we do? That's the question. Right now, what can we do? One of the things that Slam and I have had conversations about in the past is this idea of communication. I think the number one thing that we need to do right now, especially as a progressive party, is get our definitions down. We are all talking about the same thing and we are using radically different language. I can use the word racism, Slam can use the word racism, and we could be talking about two completely different things. I could be talking about overt racism, Slam could be talking about top-down racism. Now we're talking about two different. The other one, another great one, is power. Well, what does power mean? When we start talking about power dynamics, is it that somebody inherently has power? And how do they inherently have power? Or is it, when I physically do something, is that power? Is it when I activate that coercive tendency? Do I have power? And another huge one, which is, it's a very big debate in the feminist philosophy, is are trans women women? And it's the idea of what does it mean to be a woman? And the vice versa, what does it mean to be a man? These are things that we are now starting to get in, and these are very difficult questions to ask ourselves. And it's very difficult to get that communication down. Ludwig Wittgenstein was a philosopher who believed that all the problems of philosophy were due to a failure in communication, and that our cries are for solidarity. And there's another thing too that I noticed on both left and right, because I refuse to believe that everybody who voted for Trump is a racist. And the reason I say that is, we talked about that before with echo chambers. How are we to blame somebody for being in that echo chamber for an X number of years? But what's also noticed, even on the left too, we have those people on the far left that are, calling out for things that are not acceptable as well. It's both sides. But what surprises me the most is that everybody comes forward with good intentions. That everybody believes that the truth we hold and our worldview that we have will make society better for everybody. But all of a sudden now we do that. We're all arguing against these ideas of our utopias in our head about what our common truth should be. And I think what we need to do first is confront that, and at the same time is get our definitions down, get our communication down. Now we're starting to talk about the same things here. Now we're playing the game by the same rules. Now we can start moving forward with these projects. Absolutely. Does that mean we just abandon the idea of getting out whitewashing? No, not at all. Does that mean we give up on the idea of criminal justice reform? Absolutely not. We work on that, but at the same time, before we go out there and we make an argument, be it on Twitter, be it in person, be it wherever it is, make sure we get our definitions down. Make sure we understand what we're trying to do. And if someone comes at us and it goes against our understanding, take a moment and be like, are they operating in bad faith? Do they truly want to hurt an individual? Or is this somebody that's confused? And can we have, like, exactly like we're doing here? Is this a time where we can sit down and have a conversation? And this is where social media can also, and I'll end my tangent, is it's very difficult to have a very serious conversation like that when you only get 250 characters. It's almost impossible, because it also, the culture as well online is awful. It's no longer about a culture of trying to find truth, trying to figure out what's going on. We're no longer fighting for human dignity, but we're trying to say is, I'm going to dunk on this person and I'm going to post about it and it's going to be hysterical. And it's like, was it funny? Sure. But is that really productive? Did that really help anybody? Did you really do anything? No, you just made the problem worse. And now you took somebody who was trying to get out there and trying to say something, and you drove them further away from figuring out something that you knew and you were trying to help with. And so it's like figuring out how we can communicate better while also working towards these ideals that we have that I think that's the next step for us, especially getting the union workers and Gen X involved as well. Taking time with them as well are huge.
Yeah, that's a fact.
That was great. That was a great way to wrap things up, honestly.
I wanted
I
to
want to
take
take that segment and put it on our account and be like, listen, everything, like, it's not right or wrong. Just trying to find like that
Yeah.
middle ground. But I have another question is,
Can I piggyback
Wow.
off that real quick?
yeah,
Just-
yeah.
So I am a big proponent of dissolving the two-party system. I think that it's just two sides arguing the same exact thing over and over again, but using different language. And I've never considered I don't know why, but I've never considered the idea of actually clearly defining specific definitions. So I wanted to thank you for saying that so clearly and like eloquently, because I have been trying to argue that with people so often, but like I've never been able to say it that clearly. So I just wanted to say that was a really awesome way of saying that.
This is also for everybody who's watching and everyone here as well. My biggest influence is Albert Camus, and anyone who watches this who knows me is going to smile right now because I have to name drop him. But he wrote something in his underground journal, in his underground newspaper that he wrote during Nazi occupation of France. It's called Combat, and the articles he wrote are called Neither Victims Nor Executioners, and it's about taking war-torn Europe. I mean, you read it, and it's almost exactly where we are now. But it's about getting to a point where right now we want to be executioners because because we're tired of being victims. And in discussion, we're tired of being victims. But now what we have to do is we need to reach a point. We need to reach a point where we are neither victims nor executioners, and that we can walk together, everybody, and say, listen, this is what we're working towards. We need to make sure that we're getting, if Hegel is right, the end of history is the full actualization of human freedom and human dignity that resides in us. And that's what we're working towards.
Sorry, we're in Philly.
Yeah, we're in Philly, baby. Bad things happen in Philly.
That's
I'm not mute. I was muted. This is a question for Jack and for everyone: is how do you approach trying to have that difficult conversation with someone? Because like I've said this before, we've become so polarized with our thoughts, in that even when you make one little comment, the other person may perceive it and become super defensive, and they just automatically tune out and they don't want to hear it. And this goes for both sides. It's not just like conservatives and it's not just like liberals. It's people are so like, this is my truth. I'm going to stand by it. Even like, yeah, they'll be like, this is my truth. I'm going to stand by it, without trying to take that extra step backwards to see where the other person's.
Yeah, go. You got this. It's all you.
I'm just gonna start real quick. I had a class this summer, and it was the most mind-opening sentence.
I'm gonna make sure
I'm
gonna make sure our internet's good.
That you really helped me out. But we're not trying to argue, and we're not trying to attack each other, and we're not trying to change each other's minds. But the goal should be to have everyone at least be facing the problem in the same direction. So that should be the goal when you're, going about communicating with whoever, a random person, a good friend, a family member, your significant other. Just have them look at the situation the same way you do and see what, comes out of it.
I think that so it's very easy early on in a discussion to see if a person is willing to actually listen to you or not. Like you said, people get defensive extremely easily. So if they are extremely defensive and you can tell that there's absolutely like nothing you are going to say will change their mind, and I use this a lot in terms of Trump, like I always say that he could go on stage in front of thousands of people and say that he likes to eat babies for breakfast, and all of his supporters would be like, "Woo, yeah, us too," just because he said it. So like if you get into a discussion with someone where they like you can immediately tell that they're not listening to a word that you're going to say, then it's not really worth arguing with it. But if you're having a very calm discussion like we are now, then definitely just try and keep it calm and try and have that discussion rather than an argument. Like Slam said, you're not trying to necessarily get everyone on the same side. You're just trying to have them face the same way and trying to get them to like understand where you're coming from. They don't need to agree with it, but just understand where you're coming from.
I sort of want to just bounce off what Michaela was saying about, you can sort of tell really early on who's willing to listen, sort of meet you halfway. I think, just with Trump and his supporters, like it's really unlike anything we've seen before in terms of Republican candidates and presidents. Like you didn't see this type of following like McCain or Romney or any of these guys. And I don't think we've ever seen it with any Democratic candidate either. So I feel like it's going to take a lot of time just for all of us to just sort of heal. I guess, Biden talked about that yesterday, just healing back from what's happened, because even before Trump was elected, I remember trying to have conversations with people and it was already so divisive, like we couldn't even get a sentence out before everybody's attacking, and it became not an argument about them, but about, ourselves, and everything became super personal. So I think now we need time to get to that point to be able to have these conversations. I think like if you tried to go tomorrow and talk to somebody who voted for Trump, they're not going to listen to you. I mean, I probably wouldn't listen either. Like we're still so in the heat of the moment of everything going on that we just need a minute to sort of step back and look at what's happened these past 4 years, look at how we've treated each other, how, we've treated our environment, our communities, and then have a discussion about it. Maybe then we can sort of meet each other in the middle.
I think where do we go moving forward? And for me, I think it's addressing what is the root that we're all feeling, regardless of, left, right, what are we feeling? And for me, I think it's fear. And allow me to explain, we're in a strange spot. If we speak, we play into the hands, the right will say we're playing in the hands of the Marxist socialists, or, the swamp, or the other, on our side, it's this idea of we're playing into the imperialists, we're playing into the capitalist. But if we don't speak, we're playing into the same hands. So we're in a strange spot now. If we say something or don't say something, we're playing into somebody's hands. And there's a fear in that. And now we can sit down and we can debate, how, to what level of truth having those fears are real. Absolutely. But what I want to address the most is that the fear is there, and that the feeling itself of fear is valid. And the one thing that's a big problem is negative emotions are felt and remembered longer and stronger than positive emotions. There's a beautiful study by B.F. Skinner and the behaviorists in the 1960s in America, who you learn very quickly that negative emotions work. There's another thing too that's very interesting. It's called learned hopelessness and learned helplessness. And it's this, there's this idea, as the study goes, there's a dog, and one side is not electrified, the other side is. The dog goes to the electric side, the fence drops, and the floor starts to shock the dog, and he yips, and it's the dog's in pain. But now all of a sudden, after a certain amount of time, the gate goes up and the dog doesn't go back to the side that's not electrified. That the dog has been in that state of fear for so long that the dog has finally been like, okay, I just accept it. And now what we have to start asking ourselves is, are we there? Have we, in our states, inside of all of us, we have our secretly shared set of traumas, fears, hopes, dreams, and loves that should be able to bind us. We're, at the moment saying is that, yes, your trauma and your fear is valid. But now what we're going to do is, how can we work at this moment to start getting us out of that state of learned helplessness? How can we be able to, our calling call is solidarity. At the end of the day, that is what we call for. And how can we make that calling card known? And it's working towards those ideas of fear, and it's working towards those ideas of, learned helplessness that I believe that we felt so much inside of our own. And that's the problem, is getting people out of those echo chambers and first realizing it. And that fear might even be just, where's my life going? We're in a weird spot right now. We're in it's really felt now. Biden had a great line. How many American families came out and had a missing chair at the kitchen table because of this, And we don't know when that's going to happen to us. Or, it's, where am I going to go next? Or what am I going to do? And it's addressing that fear and saying, listen, that's valid. I hear you. Let's start with step one. And, I'm always big on step ones. And step one for me is addressing that fear and being like, hey, your fear is valid, but we're trying to do this. And here's how I want to do it. Lay the plan out and say, what are your objections? And listen. And listen and listen. And then there's the problem is, I think of James Baldwin. Me and you have listened to this clip how many times? James Baldwin has a great clip. How much time do you need for your progress? Mm-hmm. Love that line. And I've thought about that question for a very long time, because I don't want to silence voices that have already been silenced for so long. I don't want to condemn more bodies to the crematory fires. I don't want to do that. But for me, my response is, as much time as it takes, as long as we are showing consistent, unified effort to a better tomorrow. And that is where I'm going to kind of leave it off there. You got something?
I'm just trying to digest it.
The gears are turning. The gears are, something's coming. Something's coming.
This is some philosophy for y'all. This is what we do. Now it's conversations like this, though, that we need to keep having.
Yeah.
Just like this. And making everyone feel welcome and loved, and hold space for each other, and just let people talk and listen.
Yeah, I think that's a great note to end on. I think we just need to continue the dialogue, and especially now more than ever, because again, I know Biden was not the left-hand side first choice, but it's what we are going to work with to move forward with all of these different things that we want to see either come into fruition or be rectified, as we have been talking about. But yeah, does anyone else have any last 2 cents to throw in?
Yeah.
Oh, I threw mine in.
Missing, murdered Indigenous women, sex trafficking, it's not going away just because Biden's not out of office. So if you don't know anything about it, just know that women, your mom is under a constant threat, your sister's under a constant threat every day when they leave their house from people trying to take them and put them into sex trafficking. Even little kids, no matter how old they are, from the time they come out of a woman until they're old and dead. So yeah, just want to make sure people are up to that and research it, and we gotta fight that ASAP.
Backing onto that, definitely just try and educate yourself on literally any topic that you feel uneducated on. Try and get information from as many sources as possible, and then form your own opinions. You can hear a lot of false information, and we have seen that on social media from a certain leader.
Just by a lot.
Just try and take in as much information as you possibly can, and then form your own opinion. Just educate yourself.
I think I would just say, keep speaking up, keep making your voice heard. You know, just because we have Biden and Harris in the White House, or we're going to, doesn't mean that our job is done, doesn't mean that, you know, all the problems that have just recently come to light in the past few months that have been here forever are done, they're over, we're going back to normal, whatever that means. So, you know, just keep going out there, keep spreading, keep learning, you know, not spreading COVID, spreading information, you know, and just, I think we have to just sort of be positive now, you know, we have people there who are willing to work with us. And I think that's what we need to look forward to.
I'll try to keep it short because I feel like I've talked a lot. Thank you for having me. You know, I absolutely agree right with what Tori said. Job's not done. You know, words of Kobe Bryant, job's not done. But there's a long road ahead of us. And I think what we need to do is we need to find what gives us that strength. And, you know, for me, it's always been the sunrise or the sunset. And it's that, you know, while there's an infinite number of ways in which one may feel oppressed or hurt, there exists almost paradoxically an infinite number of ways in which we can experience the sunset. So when we do inevitably get tired, you know, I look to the sunset, and I encourage you to look to those things that give you strength to continue up until the very end.
Beautifully said. Sunsets are amazing. Thank you guys so much for being a part of this panel. And thank you everyone who's tuned in. We will see you guys next week.